The Galactic Council's emergency session had been running for 18 standard hours when Ambassador Thekvar finally spoke the words that would doom them all. His crystalline voice echoed through the vast chamber as thousands of representatives from across the galaxy listened in growing horror. "We have no choice," the Altarian delegate announced, his translucent form shimmering with anxiety. "The Devourer fleets have consumed 17 systems in the past lunar cycle. Our combined forces cannot stop them. We must activate the ancient protocol." A collective gasp rippled through the assembly. The ancient protocol was legend, myth, something discussed only in whispered conversations among the oldest species. It was said to summon warriors from the dark reaches of space, beings so savage and relentless that even the cosmos itself feared them. Council Prime. Zephyra raised her 6 arms for silence. The ethereal's voice carried the weight of millennia as she spoke. "The protocol has not been used for over 10,000 years. The last time it was invoked, entire civilizations vanished. Are we truly prepared for what we might unleash?" The Devourer crisis had begun 3 months earlier when long-range sensors detected massive biomechanical ships emerging from the void between galaxies. These weren't ordinary invaders seeking territory or resources. The Devourers consumed everything in their path, stripping planets bare, harvesting the very atoms of matter and energy, leaving behind only empty space. They moved with terrifying efficiency, their ships growing larger with each world they devoured. The first system to fall had been Kepler 442, home to the peaceful Verdani. The tree-like beings had sent desperate transmissions as continent-sized ships descended upon their world. Within 72 hours, the entire system was gone, not destroyed, but literally consumed, leaving only a void where 5 billion souls had once lived. General Koroth of the militant caste slammed his armored fist on his console. "My fleets are the finest in the galaxy, but these creatures adapt to every weapon we use. Our plasma cannons that could level mountains barely scratch their hulls. They learn from each attack and grow stronger." The Sage Council's eldest member, an ancient being whose species had forgotten their own name eons ago, floated forward on wisps of energy. "The protocol speaks of warriors from the Third Arm, beings who knew only war, who turned conflict into art. But the texts warn they cannot be controlled, only pointed in a direction and hoped they distinguish between ally and enemy." As debates raged, reports continued flowing in. The hegemony's fortress world of Titan's Rest had fallen, despite being defended by the most advanced military force in the Outer Rim. The crystalline cities of the Luminar Collective were being harvested for their unique energy matrices. The Devourer ships now numbered in the millions, each one the size of a small moon. Dr. Ileana Voss, the human xenobiologist who served as an unofficial observer, had remained silent throughout the session. Earth was not a member of the Galactic Council, humanity being considered too young and aggressive for formal recognition. But her expertise in ancient galactic history had earned her a place at these emergency sessions. "You speak of the ancient protocol as if it's mystical," she said, her voice cutting through the alien dialects. "But I've studied the archaeological evidence. The Third Arm species you're discussing, they weren't supernatural warriors. They were simply beings who had evolved under constant threat, who had learned to survive when everything else wanted them dead." The chamber fell silent as hundreds of eyes, sensors, and consciousness fields focused on the small human. She continued, her calm voice contrasting with the panic around her. "The texts describe a species that fought wars lasting centuries, who turned entire star systems into battlefields, who never surrendered and never showed mercy to those who threatened their own. You're not summoning demons or gods of war. You're calling upon survivors, the kind of beings who look at impossible odds and smile because they've faced worse." Council Prime. Zephyra's form flickered with uncertainty. Dr. Voss, the protocol requires genetic resonance to function. The summoning system scans for warrior DNA for beings shaped by endless conflict. Are you suggesting humans match this profile? Before Voss could answer, alarms shrieked through the chamber. The massive display screens lit up with emergency transmissions from the Andorian system. The Devourers had arrived at one of the galaxy's most heavily defended regions, home to the military academy where the finest soldiers from 100 worlds trained. The transmission showed Admiral Corvash, the legendary Thorian warrior whose victories were studied across the galaxy. His scaled face was grim as explosions lit the space behind him. Council Prime, our entire defense grid is failing. They've adapted to our quantum torpedoes, our particle beams, even our exotic matter weapons. We have perhaps 6 hours before the Academy falls. The weight of the moment settled on the Assembly. The Academy represented the pinnacle of galactic military might. If it fell, nothing could stop the Devourers from reaching the core worlds where trillions of beings lived. Ambassador Thekvar stood again, his form now pulsing with desperate energy. The protocol vault is beneath the council chambers. I move for an emergency vote. All in favor of activating the ancient protocol, regardless of consequences. The vote was unanimous, driven by fear and the absence of alternatives. As the representatives filed out to evacuate their home worlds, a small group descended into the ancient levels beneath the council building. The vault had been sealed for millennia, its corridors filled with warnings in dead languages. Dr. Voss followed the delegation, her scanner recording the hieroglyphs and symbol arrays that covered the walls. Her archaeological training allowed her to piece together fragments of the story. The protocol had been created by the predecessor civilization, beings who had ruled the galaxy before mysteriously vanishing. They had built it as a final safeguard against threats that conventional forces could not handle. The vault's central chamber housed a device that defied classification. It appeared to be part organic, part technological, part something else entirely. Crystalline structures pulsed with energy while biomechanical tendrils writhed in complex patterns. At its center sat a sphere of perfect darkness that seemed to absorb light itself. The genetic scanner, Council Prime Zephyra explained, her voice barely a whisper. It will search the galaxy for beings who match the warrior profile encoded in its memory. When it finds them, it sends out a call that cannot be refused. General Koroth approached the device with military precision. According to the texts, the summoned warriors receive location data, threat assessment, and tactical information directly into their minds. They come ready for war. As the ancient mechanisms activated, energy fields swept across the galaxy, probing, searching, analyzing the genetic patterns of every sentient species. The scanner hummed with increasing intensity as it processed information from billions of worlds. Then it stopped. The silence stretched for long moments before the device emitted a single clear tone. On the display screens, data began flowing in streams of incomprehensible symbols. Dr. Voss watched in fascination as her translator struggled to process the information. "It's found them," she whispered. "The scanner has located the genetic signature it was programmed to find." The coordinates appeared on the main screen, pointing toward a small blue world on the edge of the third arm. Earth. The scanner had found humanity, had identified them as the warriors the galaxy needed. The protocol had made its choice, but as the delegation stared at the coordinates in shock, none of them noticed the secondary readouts flickering to life. The scanner hadn't just found humanity, it had found something else, something its predecessor builders had never intended. Hidden within human genetic code was a marker, a signature that resonated with frequencies older than the galaxy itself. The call went out across space, a beacon that would reach Earth in mere hours. But the message carried with it more than just coordinates and tactical data. It carried an awakening, a summons to a destiny that had been written in human DNA long before their species had left the trees of Africa. The galaxy had asked for warriors to face the devourer threat. It had no idea what it had actually summoned. Humanity was coming, but they would not come as anyone expected. They would come as something far more dangerous than simple soldiers. They would come as themselves. Admiral Sarah Chen was reviewing fleet readiness reports when the headache began. It started as a dull throb behind her eyes, then exploded into searing pain that brought her to her knees in the command center of Luna Station. Around her, every human present collapsed simultaneously, their minds flooded with impossible images and sounds. The visions came in waves, alien worlds burning under strange suns, massive biomechanical ships tearing through space, the screams of dying civilizations echoing across impossible distances, and underneath it all, a voice speaking in no language humans had ever heard, yet every word was perfectly understood. Warriors of the Third Arm, the galaxy calls for aid. Come quickly, or all shall be consumed. When the episode ended, Chen found herself staring at star charts that had somehow appeared in her mind with perfect clarity. Coordinates, tactical assessments, threat analyses, all downloaded directly into her consciousness. She knew with absolute certainty that somewhere in the galaxy, an enemy called the Devourers was consuming entire star systems, and for reasons she couldn't fathom, humanity had been chosen to stop them. Across Earth and its colonies, every human had received the same vision. In boardrooms in Tokyo, construction workers in New Sao Paulo, farmers in the African Federation, miners on Europa, all 8 billion humans had become suddenly aware of a crisis light years away. But the reaction was unlike anything the galaxy might have expected from a newly contacted species. There was no panic, no desperate attempts to hide or flee. Instead, there was a cold calculation that would have terrified any alien observer who truly understood what they were seeing. President Martinez convened the Global Defense Council within hours. The chamber buzzed with grim determination as military leaders, scientists, and politicians processed the implications of their shared vision. The weight of an entire galaxy's survival rested on their shoulders, and to the aliens' horror, humanity seemed pleased by the challenge. Analysis confirms the visions are consistent across all population centers, reported Director Kim of the Psychic Phenomena Research Division. Every human received identical tactical data. Somehow, our entire species has been briefed for a military operation we never volunteered for. General Thompson, scarred from the Martian Independence War, studied the holographic display showing Devourer ship configurations. Look at these things. Biomechanical, adaptive, capable of harvesting entire worlds. They're not just invaders, they're a galactic-scale extinction event. The question, President Martinez said quietly, is why us? We're barely a Type 1 civilization. Our fastest ships can't even reach the nearest star in less than a century. How are we supposed to fight something that spans galaxies? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins, a geneticist studying the strange resonance patterns in human DNA that had become active since the visions, made a discovery that changed everything. The marker isn't human, she announced to the stunned council. It's artificial, implanted in our genetic code millions of years ago by an unknown intelligence. We've been carrying dormant programming this entire time. As her research continued, the horrifying truth emerged. Humanity hadn't evolved naturally. They had been engineered, crafted by the same predecessor civilization that had built the summoning device. The endless wars, the survival instincts, the refusal to surrender even in the face of impossible odds, it was all by design. We are weapons, General Thompson said with dark satisfaction. Built for a war that ended before our species learned to make fire, and now something has activated our programming. The realization should have sparked outrage or existential crisis. Instead, it sparked something far more dangerous: enthusiasm. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they knew not only were they not alone, but they had been created specifically to excel at humanity's favorite pastime: warfare. The mobilization began immediately. Every spaceship, from massive cargo haulers to tiny mining craft, was requisitioned and refitted for combat. The engineering marvels that followed would have amazed any galactic observer. Humans began stripping asteroids to build weapons, converting industrial facilities into shipyards, and designing new technologies with a speed that defied their supposed technological limitations. Captain Maria Santos watched from the bridge of the hastily converted cargo ship Relentless as Earth's orbital space filled with an armada that hadn't existed a week earlier. The ship had been a grain transport 6 days ago. Now it bristled with kinetic weapons, plasma cannons, and experimental devices that human engineers had designed in fevered bursts of inspiration. "Engineering reports ready on the new weapons systems," her first officer announced. "The quantum disruption torpedoes are showing promising results in simulations." Santos nodded, her mind still processing the tactical data from her vision. The Devourers adapted to energy weapons, so humans were building kinetic systems. They learned from repeated attacks, so humans were designing single-use weapons that would never fire the same way twice. They absorbed and repurposed technology, so humans were crafting weapons that would self-destruct if captured. But the most disturbing development was happening to the humans themselves. The genetic programming wasn't just giving them tactical knowledge, it was changing them, optimizing them for war in ways both subtle and profound. Reaction times were improving. Stress responses were adapting. Most unsettling of all, humans were developing an intuitive understanding of violence that went beyond their species' already impressive track record. Dr. Hawkins studied the brain scans with growing unease. The changes are accelerating. Neural pathways associated with aggression, tactical thinking, and threat assessment are strengthening. We're becoming more efficient killers every day. "Good," Admiral Chen replied without hesitation. "If we're going to save the galaxy, we might as well be properly equipped for the job." The first human ships began launching within a week of receiving the visions. They used a combination of fusion drives, experimental jump drives, reverse-engineered from theoretical physics, and pure desperate ingenuity to traverse distances that should have taken decades. The journey to the Andorian system, where the Devourers were laying siege to the military academy, would normally require a century of travel. Humanity made it in 3 weeks. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Galactic Council watched in horror as long-range sensors tracked the approaching human fleet. What they saw defied their understanding of physics and military doctrine. The ships moved in formations that looked random but somehow achieved perfect tactical efficiency. They emitted energy signatures that suggested weapons far beyond what a pre-contact civilization should possess. Most terrifying of all, they were accelerating. Council Prime Zephyra studied the sensor data with mounting dread. "How many ships are they sending?" "Preliminary counts suggest 12,000 vessels," General Korath reported. "But the signatures are unusual. Many appear to be civilian craft modified for combat. Their approach vectors make no tactical sense by any known doctrine." Dr. Voss, still serving as humanity's unofficial representative, watched the data with a mix of pride and terror. She understood what the aliens were seeing. Humanity wasn't sending a military force according to galactic standards. They were sending their entire civilization to war. "The cargo ships, the passenger liners, the research vessels," she explained to the increasingly nervous council. "Humans don't distinguish between military and civilian resources when facing an existential threat. Every ship capable of mounting weapons has been converted for combat. Every human capable of fighting has volunteered." The implications sent shockwaves through the assembly. Most galactic civilizations fought wars with professional militaries representing tiny fractions of their population. The idea of an entire species mobilizing for conflict was beyond their experience. "How many of them are coming?" Ambassador Thekvar asked, his crystalline form flickering with anxiety. Voss checked her communications link to Earth. The answer, when it came, would later be recorded as the moment the galaxy truly understood what they had summoned. "All of them," she said quietly. 8 billion humans are currently en route to combat zones across the galaxy. They've left skeleton crews on Earth and sent everyone else to war." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of several alien delegates fainting. They had asked for warriors and received an entire civilization dedicated to violence. The Devourers were about to face something the galaxy had never seen, a species that didn't just fight wars, but embraced them with terrifying joy. As the first human ships approached the Andorian system, Admiral Chen opened a communication channel to the besieged military academy. Her message was brief, delivered in perfect galactic standard that she had somehow learned during the journey. "This is Admiral Chen of the Terran Defense Force. We received your invitation to the party. Hope you saved some for us." The galaxy was about to learn why the predecessors had built humanity as their ultimate weapon. The Devourers had adapted to every form of warfare they had encountered, but they had never encountered anything like humanity's particular brand of organized chaos. The real war was about to begin. The Battle of Andorian Station began when Admiral Chen's flagship, Indomitable, dropped out of hyperspace directly into the middle of the Devourer formation. What followed defied every principle of galactic warfare that had been developed over millennia of civilization. Instead of the careful, methodical approach favored by the galaxy's military forces, the human fleet scattered into what appeared to be complete chaos. Ships broke formation and attacked from impossible angles, using maneuvers that should have torn them apart under gravitational stress. The Devourers, accustomed to adapting to conventional tactics, found themselves facing something their biomechanical minds couldn't process: organized insanity. Captain Santos brought the Relentless screaming through the gap between two Devourer vessels, her cargo ship's improvised weapons blazing. The kinetic rounds punched through biomechanical armor that had previously shrugged off the galaxy's most advanced weapons. But what truly confused the Devourers was that each shot was different, using varying projectiles and explosive charges that prevented their adaptive systems from developing counters. "Target their feeding appendages," Santos ordered her crew. "If they can't harvest matter, they can't grow stronger." The observation highlighted humanity's greatest advantage. They understood their enemy's fundamental weakness. The Devourers weren't just conquerors, they were consumers. Their entire biology depended on constant feeding and growth. Deny them that, and they became vulnerable. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, leading a squadron of converted mining vessels, implemented a tactic that would later be studied in war colleges across the galaxy. Instead of trying to destroy Devourer ships outright, his fleet began systematically destroying asteroids, gas giants, and other matter sources in the system. "If they're hungry," Rodriguez announced over the comm, "let's give them a diet." The strategy worked with horrifying efficiency. Devourer ships that had seemed invincible began showing signs of stress as their biological systems were denied the constant flow of raw materials they required. Their adaptive capabilities began faltering as energy was diverted to basic survival functions. But the most devastating weapon in humanity's arsenal wasn't technological. It was psychological warfare on a scale the galaxy had never imagined. Dr. Sarah Kim, broadcasting from the communications ship Defiance, began transmitting human music across all frequencies. The selection was deliberate and devastating. Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries, Metallica's Master of Puppets, and dozens of other pieces specifically chosen to project humanity's absolute confidence in their ability to wage war. The effect on galactic observers was immediate and terrifying. Species that had spent millions of years developing sophisticated diplomatic solutions to conflict found themselves listening to music that glorified violence with an artistic sophistication that suggested humanity had elevated warfare to an art form. Council Prime Zephyra, monitoring the battle from the Emergency Command Center, watched in horror as human tactics proved devastatingly effective. "They're not just fighting," she observed. "They're enjoying this." The truth was even more disturbing. Combat reports from human commanders revealed a species that had found its calling. Stress hormones that would have debilitated other species were actually improving human performance. The genetic programming activated by the ancient protocol hadn't just given them tactical knowledge. It had awakened something that had been dormant for millions of years. General Thompson, commanding the assault on the largest Devourer vessel, led a boarding action that would become legendary. His Marines moved through the biomechanical corridors with a precision that suggested they had been fighting in such environments their entire lives. When they encountered Devourer defense organisms, the humans adapted faster than their enemies, turning the creature's own biological weapons against them. "Sir, we've reached what appears to be the central nervous system," Sergeant Adams reported as her squad carved through living walls with plasma cutters. "Outstanding," Thompson replied. "Plant the neural disruptor and let's see how they like having their brain chemistry altered." The device was a human innovation inspired by studying captured Devourer tissue. Instead of trying to destroy the massive ship, they were performing impromptu surgery on its central consciousness, effectively lobotomizing it from within. The technique was both brilliant and profoundly disturbing to galactic observers who had never considered warfare at such an intimate biological level. As the battle raged, Admiral Chen found herself facing the Alpha Devourer, a ship the size of a small moon that had consumed dozens of star systems. The creature's biomechanical voice echoed across space as it attempted to communicate. "Unknown species, your resistance is futile. We have consumed civilizations spanning millions of years. We adapt to all weapons, all tactics. You will be absorbed as all others have been." Chen's response was broadcast across the galaxy and would later be carved into monuments on 100 worlds. "You've never met humans before. We don't adapt to war. We make war adapt to us." The Indomitable accelerated directly toward the Alpha Devourer's primary feeding mouth, a maneuver that appeared suicidal until the ship's true purpose became clear. The vessel was loaded with experimental quantum mines, each one programmed to detonate at a different phase of reality. The explosion wouldn't just destroy matter, it would collapse local space-time, creating a wound in the universe itself. The sacrifice of the Indomitable and her crew eliminated the Alpha Devourer and crippled the entire enemy fleet. But more importantly, it sent a message that resonated across galactic civilization. Humanity was willing to pay any price to achieve victory. As the remaining Devourer ships retreated, limping away from a battle they had been certain to win, the galaxy took stock of what they had witnessed. A species that had been contacted less than a month ago had achieved what the combined might of galactic civilization could not. They had forced the Devourers to retreat. But the victory at Andorian Station was just the beginning. Across the galaxy, human fleets were engaging Devourer forces with the same devastating effectiveness. The patterns were always the same: chaotic tactics that somehow achieved perfect coordination, innovative weapons that turned the enemy's strengths against them, and a psychological approach to warfare that treated violence as both science and art. Dr. Voss studied the after-action reports with growing unease. "They're not just winning," she reported to the Galactic Council. "They're dominating. Devourer forces are retreating from systems they've held for months. But the humans aren't stopping at defense." The terrifying truth was becoming clear. Humanity hadn't just responded to the galaxy's call for help. They had embraced it as an opportunity to expand their influence across the stars. Human fleets were pursuing retreating devourers, establishing bases on liberated worlds, and making contact with grateful civilizations who saw them as saviors. Within 6 months, the devourer threat was eliminated. The biomechanical ships that had terrorized the galaxy were either destroyed or had fled to intergalactic space. But the galaxy now faced a new reality. Humanity was no longer a pre-contact species hiding on the edge of known space. They were a major power with fleets stationed across dozens of systems. The final session of the Galactic Council's Emergency Assembly was unlike any in its history. Representatives who had begged for humanity's help now watched nervously as Admiral Chen, now bearing the title of Commander-in-Chief of Terran Forces, addressed the gathering. "The devourer threat has been neutralized," she announced, her calm voice carrying across the chamber. "Our fleets have pursued the survivors beyond the galactic rim. They won't be returning." The relief was palpable, but it was mixed with a new fear. The humans had saved the galaxy, but what did they want in return? Chen's next words answered that question in a way that would reshape galactic civilization forever. "We've received thousands of requests from liberated worlds asking for human protection against future threats. We've decided to honor those requests. Effective immediately, the Terran Protectorate will establish peacekeeping forces in any system that requests our assistance." The implications were staggering. Humanity was offering protection to any world that wanted it, but protection from humanity's military force was indistinguishable from occupation by it. The species that had saved the galaxy from the devourers was now positioned to dominate it. Council Prime Zephyra found her voice with difficulty. "And what of the Galactic Council's authority in these systems?" Chen's smile was polite but carried an edge that made several delegates shiver. "The Council is welcome to continue its important work of facilitating dialogue between species, but security matters will now fall under Terran jurisdiction." As the humans departed to establish their new empire, one built on grateful submission rather than conquest, Dr. Voss made a final entry in her research logs that would never be published. "We summoned humanity to save us from monsters, never realizing that we had called upon the greatest monsters of all. The devourers consumed worlds. Humans consume civilizations, and they make their victims grateful for the privilege. The ancient protocol had worked exactly as designed." The predecessor civilization had created humanity as the perfect weapon, a species that wouldn't just defeat threats to galactic civilization, but would ensure that such threats could never arise again by placing the entire galaxy under the protection of humanity's eternal war machine. The galaxy was safe. The galaxy was protected. The galaxy was, for the first time in its history, under the benevolent rule of beings who had turned warfare into the highest form of art. And deep in the ruins of the ancient protocol's vault, dormant systems continued to monitor the galaxy, waiting for the next phase of humanity's programming to activate when their expansion reached sufficient levels. The predecessors had planned for every contingency, even the one where their ultimate weapons might eventually need to be stopped.